My name is Emily Carter, and I never wanted revenge. I wanted a quiet life, a small kitchen with yellow light, and a man who kept his promises. But life does not always give you what you want. Sometimes it hands you something sharp and cold and asks, "What will you do with this?" The first time I saw the church that morning, it looked like a shiny lie. White roses, crystal vases, a string quartet tipping their bows like they were saluting a queen. My ex, Jason Reed, had chosen a place that screamed money. It was the kind of place where even the stairs looked expensive. I stepped out of the black car on legs that felt steady, even though my heart was punching my ribs. I had not come to cry. I had not come to beg. I had come to end something that should have ended months ago. Jason had sent me an invitation with a smiley face sticker on the flap. "Come and see how happy we are," the note said. He wanted me there to feel small. He wanted me there to watch him marry someone else and pretend I never mattered. Instead, I made sure the whole city saw how I arrived. The roar of the private jet still hummed in my ears from the short flight. People in the parking lot were already whispering, "Who is she? Is she famous?" They stared at the plane taxiing out in the distance like a metal bird with a secret, then stared at me. I let them. My dress was simple and black, the color of midnight. My hair was pinned up. My face was calm. Behind my calm, a wildfire burned. I walked past the red carpet Jason had ordered for himself. I walked past a table covered with white gift bags and gold ribbon. I walked straight to the courtyard, pulled out my phone, and called a number I had saved and guarded like a life jacket. "Detective Hall." A voice answered, low and serious. "It's Emily," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's time." There was a pause. Then, understood. "We're close." I hung up. I could feel the air change, like storm clouds gathering that only I could see. The string quartet kept playing. The guests kept laughing. The bride's father lifted his glass. And I stood there, right in the middle of all that sparkle and noise, thinking about every little choice that had led me to this exact spot. This is where I stop and tell you how I got here. Because nothing about this started with a jet or a phone call. It started with me and Jason in a tiny apartment with a leaky sink, eating takeout on cardboard boxes on a Sunday night. Back then, I believed in us with my whole chest. Jason was funny, warm, and a little wild. He kissed my knuckles before interviews and left sticky notes on the fridge like, "Proud of you, Em." He worked at a startup and said the word future like it was a gift he was wrapping just for me. We had big plans. A dog. A house. Someday, a baby who would have Jason's green eyes and my serious eyebrows. Then the cracks came. Cracks look small at first, like hairlines in glass. But if you keep pushing and pushing, if you ignore what you know in your bones, they spread. The first crack was his late nights. "Emergency at work," he said, and I wanted to be a supportive partner, so I made coffee at midnight and stayed awake till 2, just in case he needed a ride home. The second crack was his new cologne, the one he wore only on team dinners. The third crack was the lipstick stain on the collar of his white shirt. He laughed when I showed him. A coworker hugged me, "Babe. You know how people are." I did know how people are. I also knew that Jason had started guarding his phone like it was a newborn. He held it face down on the table. He took it to the bathroom. He set a new password. I told myself to breathe. I told myself to wait for proof. I told myself I was not crazy. But love can make you doubt your own eyes. It can make you build castles out of words when there is only dust. Proof arrived on a Tuesday at 5:23 p.m. The timing is burned into me. I had come home early from a client meeting with a bag of groceries and a plan to make his favorite pasta. I was humming while I chopped garlic. Then, I heard a noise from our bedroom. A laugh. Jason's laugh, low and sweet, the one he used to say for me. Another laugh answered it, light as a bell. Her name was Lauren. I knew it later. In that moment, all I knew was that a woman was in my bed with my boyfriend, and my hands were shaking so badly the knife clinked against the counter. I did not fight. I did not scream. I walked into the hallway, and my feet felt far away from me, like they belonged to a stranger. The door opened. Jason froze. The woman froze. The air went tight like a string. "Emily," he said, soft, like my name was something he could still own. I set the knife down. I looked at both of them. And then I walked out. I do not remember the elevator ride. I do not remember the street or the taxi, or the way the city light hit the windows of tall buildings like little suns. I remember the sound my breath made, a small, hurt animal sound, and I remember calling my best friend, Ava. Ava came. Ava always comes. She sat with me on her couch while I cried into a paper towel because her apartment had run out of tissues. She made me drink water. She made me take a shower. She put my phone on airplane mode like a shield. In the morning, my phone had 23 messages from Jason. He was sorry. He was drunk. He was stupid. He loved me. He had made a mistake. He wanted to make it right. He wanted to talk. He wanted me to understand. But there are some doors you close and lock from the inside. I did not answer. I went back to the apartment when he was at work, packed a suitcase, and left my key on the kitchen table next to a bowl of lemons we never used. Weeks turned into months. I found a small place near the river with creaky floors and good light. I started running every morning at 6, my feet pounding out angry music on the sidewalk. I bought groceries that were just for me. I learned how to sleep without listening for a second set of footsteps. Then the invitation came. It was white with gold edges. It looked like a snowflake made of money. "Jason Reed and Lauren Brooks invite you to celebrate their union," it said. And then, in handwriting I knew too well, "You should come, M. You'll want to see what you lost." I held that card like it might bite. I laughed once, a single sharp sound that hurt my own ears. Then I placed it on the counter and did nothing for a full day. On day 2, I showed it to Ava. She swore loud enough that her neighbor banged on the wall. On day 3, I took a deep breath and asked myself the hardest question: what kind of person do I want to be? I did not want to be the girl who screams in a parking lot. I did not want to be the girl who slashes a tire or ruins a dress out of spite. I wanted to be the girl who walks away with her head high and her hands clean. But I also wanted the truth to count. Jason had not just broken my heart. He had broken rules at work. He had used me like a shield while he did it. You see, a month before I found him with Lauren, I started noticing odd charges on our shared credit card. Catering, floral deposits, venue fees, all in my name. When I asked, he smiled and said, "Planning something big for us, babe." I did not push because love is a soft blanket we hide under when the night is cold. But after I left, those charges kept coming. When I called the vendor numbers, they said, "Jason gave us this card. He said it was his fiancé's account." Me. He said me. I froze the card. I argued the charges. I met with a bank rep who wore a tie with tiny ducks on it and said, "We'll investigate." And then, by a twist of grace, I met someone who changed everything. Her name was Mrs. Fullerton. She owned the small company where I did brand design on the side to make extra money. One afternoon, I stayed late to help her clean up after a charity event. She asked why I looked so tired. I told her a little. Not everything. Just enough. She listened like she was catching each word before it hit the floor. Then she put her hand over mine and said, "People like that leave their fingerprints everywhere when they think no one is watching." She introduced me to Detective Hall, a friend of hers who handled white-collar cases. I gave him my emails, my bills, the dates, the names. I told him about the vendor calls. I told him about the company Jason worked for and the new consulting fees that showed up right after he started seeing Lauren, the CEO's niece. Detective Hall did not promise anything. He only said, "If there's smoke, we'll find the fire." We found it. Not fast. Not easy. But we found it. There were kickbacks. There were fake invoices. There were deposits that hopped from one account to another like frogs on hot stones. There was my name, used like a rag to clean up his mess. And there was the wedding, paid for with money that was not his to spend. I did not plan to humiliate anyone. I planned to tell the truth in a way that would finally matter. I told Detective Hall the date and time of the ceremony. He told me to keep my head and let the law do its job. "You don't need to touch a single thing," he said. "You just need to stand there." So I stood there, in that glittering courtyard, phone still warm in my hand, and let the memory of the private jet settle like a dare in the air. The jet was not mine. I would never pretend it was. It belonged to a client whose nonprofit I had helped for free when their website crashed before a fundraiser. I stayed up 2 nights fixing it, and they raised enough to keep their shelter open. When I told them why I needed to arrive quiet and fast and on time, they did not ask for details. They just said, "We'll get you there." Kindness circles back. That is a rule I believe in now. You put good in the world, and one day, when you are standing in a beautiful place with trembling hands and steel in your spine, good will find you again. The music shifted to Pachelbel's canon. The guests stood. I could see Jason through the glass doors, straightening his tie, that same cocky tilt to his chin I used to think was charming. Lauren touched his sleeve. Her dress sparkled like frost. Cameras flashed. Bridesmaids glided. The air smelled like roses and money and the last seconds of a bad dream. I could have walked away. I could have swallowed my anger and let them have their perfect day. But I thought about the vendors he lied to. I thought about my name on bills I never made. I thought about girls like me who are made to feel crazy for asking simple questions, and how silence only feeds people who count on it.
So I stayed.
A less extreme moment found me then, small and soft against all the noise. A boy in a blue blazer bumped into my elbow. He could not have been more than 10. "Sorry," he whispered, eyes wide at the crowd. His mother tugged him along. He smiled at me, shy and bright. It made something gentle open in my chest. Not everything in the world was sharp. Not everything had teeth. There were still children in blue blazers who said sorry like they meant it. There were still small mercies to hold on to. The quartet reached the part where everyone sighs. The doors to the aisles swung wider. Jason lifted his chin higher. And then, far away at first and then closer, I heard it, sirens. They were not loud at the beginning. They were a rumor of sound, a trembling edge at the bottom of the music. A few people turned their heads. The boy in the blazer looked at me again, eyes round. The sirens grew until they pressed against the song, then swallowed it whole. The first police car rolled to the curb, lights spinning red and blue over the white roses. Another car followed, then a black SUV. The air went still, like the world took a breath and held it. Inside the glass doors, Jason's smile cracked. The officers stepped out. Detective Hall was with them, his suit plain, his face unreadable. He nodded once, almost so small I could have imagined it. Guests whispered. A bridesmaid put her hand to her mouth. The string quartet lowered their bows one by one, like flowers drooping in heat. "Emily," Ava whispered at my shoulder. I hadn't even seen her slip in. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. The officers walked toward the entrance. The doors opened. A wave of cool air spilled over the courtyard, and with it came the sound of someone shouting inside. I could not make out the words, only the panic in them. A photographer saw the badges and moved aside so fast he almost tripped over a centerpiece. Detective Hall lifted a folder. Another officer put out his hand, palm steady, like a stop sign. Everything slowed. Jason took a step back. Lauren grabbed his arm. Her bouquet slipped, white petals scattering across the marble like little pieces of snow. And then, in that high, bright room, with the world watching and the music gone quiet, the lead officer opened his mouth to speak. And that is when the chandeliers flickered, the power dipped, and the church alarms exploded into a screaming red light that washed the aisle in color. A voice boomed from somewhere above us. "Attention! Attention! Evacuate the building." The guests froze. The sirens outside wailed. The alarms inside blared. Detective Hall lifted his eyes to the ceiling. Jason turned toward the side door, toward the parking lot, toward escape. I took one step forward, heart steady now, and watched the day Jason built for his pride buckle like tin under a storm. What happened next? You'll see. The alarm screamed through the church like angry voices from the walls themselves. Red lights pulsed above the guests' heads, throwing shadows that stretched and snapped across their shocked faces. The orchestra froze mid-note, their instruments trembling in their hands. White roses shook from the vibrations of a sound system. The chaos moved fast. A bridesmaid screamed, high-pitched and raw. The boy in the blue blazer clung to his mother's arm. Guests turned in every direction, whispering, panicking, trying to understand whether this was a drill or some kind of cruel joke. Jason's face turned pale, and Lauren gripped his sleeve so tight her manicured nails left tiny crescents in the fabric of his suit. "Everyone stay calm," shouted one of the ushers, though his own voice wobbled. "It's probably just." The church doors slammed open. Detective Hall stepped inside, his expression carved in stone. He didn't flinch at the alarms, didn't even blink. He raised a hand, and the officers fanned out behind him like a tide. Their badges glinted under the flashing lights. One carried a thick folder, another had a hand resting near the radio on his shoulder. Authority wrapped around them like armor. The whispers sharpened into words. "Police. What's going on? Why are they here?" Cameras from eager guests turned like sunflowers, recording every moment. This wedding was already going viral, and it hadn't even started. Jason swallowed hard, his jaw clenched. He stepped forward with that same arrogant tilt to his head, the one I once thought was strength. But I could see it now, the cracks forming beneath his skin, the fear he couldn't quite hide. "Jason Reed," Detective Hall's voice boomed, steady and cold. "We need to have a word with you." A ripple ran through the crowd. Jason tried to laugh, but the sound came out sharp and wrong. "This is my wedding. Whatever this is, it can wait until tomorrow." Hall didn't move. "It cannot." Lauren's eyes darted around, searching for someone to explain this nightmare away. "What's happening?" "Jason, what's going on?" she whispered, but her voice carried in the hush. Jason tugged at his collar, sweat starting to gather on his forehead. "This is a mistake," he said louder, forcing confidence into his tone. "You have no right to barge in here." Hall raised the folder. "We have every right. Financial fraud. Identity misuse. Embezzlement." His gaze swept the room. This wedding was funded with stolen money. Gasps exploded. A woman dropped her champagne flute, and glass shattered across the marble floor. Guests recoiled like the words themselves were poisonous. The bride's father, a tall man with silver hair, stood abruptly, his face turning crimson. "Lauren," he barked. "Is this true?" Lauren's lips trembled. She shook her head violently, eyes filling with tears. "Dad, I don't know what they're talking about." "Jason, tell them." Jason's hands balled into fists. He took a step backward, then another. His eyes flicked to the side door again. He was calculating escape. I knew that look. He'd used it on me before, when I caught him in lies, when he thought charm could erase truth. The alarms wailed louder, the red light painting everything like a crime scene. And there I stood, at the back of the church, calm in the middle of the storm. Guests' eyes began to turn, one by one, toward me. Whispers again. She came in a private jet. Who is she? Why does she look so steady? Jason saw me. Our eyes locked. In that moment, every ounce of power shifted. He knew. He knew I hadn't just come to watch him humiliate me. I had come to end the game. For a flicker of a second, his mask cracked wide open. Fear, raw and naked, swam in his eyes. "Emily," he said low, but I read the shape of my name on his lips even across the crowded room. I tilted my head, just a fraction, calm as stone. That tiny gesture undid him. "Arrest him," Hall said. The officer stepped forward, hands reaching for Jason's arms. The crowd erupted into a storm, guests shouting, chairs scraping, bridesmaids crying, the groom's father demanding answers. Lauren collapsed into her father's arms, sobbing, her veil sliding off onto the floor. Jason jerked away, twisting toward the side door, shoving past two guests. He bolted, his shiny shoes slipping on the marble. And then, a loud bang echoed through the hall. The side door slammed shut with force from the outside. An officer was already there, blocking his escape. Jason spun, trapped, eyes wild. For one moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Would Jason surrender? Would he fight? The boy in the blue blazer whispered to his mother. Is the groom going to jail? The answer hovered, heavy and sharp, in the flashing red light. And then Jason lunged. Jason lunged. Chairs scraped. Guests screamed. A bridesmaid dropped her bouquet, and white petals slid across the floor like snow. Two officers moved fast, reaching for Jason's arms. He twisted hard and broke free for a second, a wild look in his eyes, sweat shining at his temple. He darted toward the side aisle, knocking over a tall candelabra. It hit the marble with a clang and rolled, metal ringing under the alarms. "Stop!" an officer shouted. Jason jumped over a row of programs like a boy cutting class. He grabbed the edge of a table to swing himself forward, but the tablecloth came with him. Champagne flutes crashed. Gold place cards scattered like fallen leaves. The usher nearest him stepped in front. Jason shoved him. The man stumbled, but stayed on his feet. An officer seized Jason's right wrist. Another caught his left. There was a short, ugly struggle, elbows, shoes sliding, Jason cursing through his teeth, then a hard, certain sound. The click of handcuffs. The room held its breath. Lauren's sobbing turned into hiccups. Her veil, half off, dragged on the floor. The string quartet stood frozen, bows midair like they were trapped inside a painting. Red light from the alarms kept washing over everyone's faces, on off, as if the whole wedding were a warning sign. Detective Hall stepped close, calm as ever. "Jason Reed, you're under arrest for fraud, identity misuse, and embezzlement. You have the right to remain silent." His voice was steady, but not cruel. He sounded like a man who had said these words many times and still felt the weight of them. Jason's jaw clenched. His eyes found me through the crowd like magnets find iron. He tried to smile, but it wasn't a smile. It was a flinch with teeth. "You did this," he said, not loud, but I could read his lips. "You." I did not nod. I did not gloat. I kept my face still. Inside, my heart knocked against my ribs like a fist on a door, but it was a strong knock, not a scared one. "Everyone outside, please," a venue manager shouted over the alarms. "This is a fire alarm. We need to clear the building now." The officers began to move Jason toward the side corridor. Two more officers guided guests to the exits. The bride's father stood stiff and furious, his mouth a hard line. The mother of the bride kept saying, "This cannot be real. This cannot be real." Like if she spoke it, time would rewind. Outside in the courtyard, air rushed cool and bright into my lungs. The sirens were less loud here, less like a scream, and more like a reminder. People spilled out in clusters, heels tapping the stone, phone cameras up, dresses rustling. Red and blue lights from the patrol cars swept over the white roses, turning them pink, then purple, then white again. For a second the scene looked almost magical, like a dream where everything is beautiful and wrong. The boy in the blue blazer stood off to the side with his mother. He looked up at the sky, as if he could read answers there. His lower lip trembled. "Hey," I said softly, crouching to his level. "Are you okay?" He nodded too quickly. "Is the groom going to jail?" he whispered. "I don't know everything yet," I said. "But the police are here to make things right. And you and your mom are safe. That's the most important part right now." He blinked at me, his eyes shiny. "My dad says only bad people go to jail." "Sometimes good people make bad choices," I said. "And sometimes people get hurt. But today, the grown-ups who protect us are doing their job. When that happens, we say thank you, and we stand back." He swallowed. "Okay." I smiled small. "You did great coming outside fast. That helps everyone." He pressed his lips together, proud in a quiet way. His mother mouthed thank you to me over his head. Ava slid in beside me and slipped her hand into mine. Her palm was warm, steady. "You breathing?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "You're a lighthouse right now," she whispered. "Don't forget to turn your light on yourself." I let out a breath I'd been holding since the alarms first screamed. "I won't." Near the curb, Lauren leaned against her father. Her mascara had smudged into gray moons under her eyes. Her bouquet was gone. She stared at Jason through the glass doors like she still believed he might fix this if he just said the right words. My chest hurt a little for her. I remembered what it felt like to want to believe. I remembered how soft and dangerous that wanting could be. The venue manager, a woman with a neat bun and a clipboard, climbed onto a low step. "Everyone," she called, voice firm. "The fire system registered a fault in the East Wing. We're investigating. Please remain outside until we give the all clear. Water is available at the refreshment table to your left." People drifted toward the table. I grabbed 2 bottles and handed one to Ava. She raised it in a tiny toast. "To closure," she said. "To truth," I answered. We drank. For a few beats, the world felt simple. Water, air, light, the steady sound of the city. Even the alarms had softened to a background pulse, like a heart you could hear. Kindness came and sat next to me on that step. Not because I was the hero. I was not. I was just a woman who finally stopped trying to carry a man's lies like they were groceries that might spill. But kindness sat with me anyway. It looked like the boy in the blue blazer making sure a little flower girl had a cup of water. It looked like a bridesmaid taking off her own shawl to wrap around Lauren's shaking shoulders. It looked like an officer speaking gently to an older guest who kept asking if she could please go back for her purse. Kindness was everywhere if you looked for it. Detective Hall stepped out with 2 officers and Jason between them. The handcuffs were visible now. The crowd drew back, parted, then closed again at a safer distance, a living wave. Phone cameras rose like a mechanical field of sunflowers. Jason tried to throw his shoulders back, to look taller, but the cuffs made his arms hang awkwardly, like a suit that didn't fit. Lauren broke from her father and ran forward 3 steps. "Jason," she cried. "Tell them. Say it's a mistake." Jason's mouth twisted. "Babe, he stopped. He looked at Detective Hall. He looked at me. He looked at the cameras. His pupils were blown wide, black as marbles. Words failed him for once. And because he could not control the story, he tried to control the moment. He jerked his arms hard. The officers held him. He jerked again, harder. One officer planted his feet and did not move. Jason hissed something through his teeth that I could not hear. "Easy," Hall said, voice calm. "Fighting won't help you." "None of this helps me," Jason spat, finally loud enough for the crowd to hear. "This is a circus. It's her." He jutted his chin at me. "She did this. She wants to ruin me." My throat went dry, but my voice stayed level. "You ruined yourself." It wasn't a victory shout. It wasn't a cut. It was a sentence that felt like a door simply closing. A hush ran through the guests. It was the kind of hush that means people are holding 2 truths at once, the one they were promised and the one they are seeing. The less extreme part of this day followed like a small, careful step. Officers guided Jason to the black SUV. Someone handed Lauren a tissue. The venue manager spoke into her radio, her voice soft and professional. A little girl chased a pedal that the wind kept just out of her reach. The boy in the blue blazer found it for her, gave her a thumbs up. Ava and I sat on the step and let our breathing slow together, long inhales, long exhales like waves. "Do you want to leave?" Ava asked. I thought about it. I really did. The plane could carry me away in minutes. I could be hot tea and soft socks by nightfall. But running had never fixed the part of me that was tired of being small for other people's comfort. "Not yet," I said. "I want to see this through." "Okay," she said. "I'm with you." The venue manager climbed onto the step again, microphone in hand this time. "Everyone," she said, "we're going to be honest with you. The alarm was triggered by a systems check that was tampered with." She glanced toward the doors where the officers had gone. "For safety reasons, the building will remain closed today. We're working with the authorities. Please collect your belongings from the staff at the side table. If you parked in the east lot, you'll be directed through the south gate." There was plain words like clean water. The ceremony was over before it began. Not because I screamed. Not because I threw paint on a dress. Because the truth had finally found a microphone. Murmurs rose. Some people were angry. Some were relieved. Most were just stunned. The way you get when a story you thought you were in turns out to be a different book entirely. Lauren stood very still, tissue in hand, eyes empty, like someone had turned off all the lights inside her. Her father's face was stone. He stared at me, and the look was not kind. It said, "You did this." It said, "I will make you regret it." It said, "I am a man who believes money is a shield, and I am confused to find out it is not." He broke away from his family and walked straight toward me. His steps were not loud, but they felt heavy. Two of his friends in dark suits came with him, a little behind, like shadows. "Are you Emily Carter?" he asked when he reached me. His voice was even, smooth as polished wood. The kind of voice that sells deals. The kind of voice that eats smaller voices for breakfast. "Yes," I said. He studied me the way a banker studies numbers on a page. "You're the ex." "I'm a person," I said. A tiny line flicked at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a smile. "You made a call that shut my daughter's wedding down." "I made a call that told the truth," I said. "Truth," he repeated, like he was rolling a coin across his knuckles. He leaned in a fraction, just enough to smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. "Here is another truth. You have just made an enemy you cannot afford." Ava stood up beside me. "Back up," she said, soft but steel. "She's not alone." He looked at Ava, then back at me, then past me to where the officers had gone with Jason. Something sharp moved behind his eyes. Not fear. Not yet. Calculation. "Enjoy your moment," he said. "It will be short." He turned away, signaled to his two shadows, and they followed him back through the crowd. My hands were steady, but a small tremor ran through my arms afterwards, the way a building hums after a train passes. Ava squeezed my fingers. "Men like that use threats like business cards," she said. "They hand them out to feel tall." "I know," I said. "But I also know he has lawyers on speed dial." "And we have Hall," she said. "And the truth. And receipts." "Receipts are my favorite," I said, and we both almost smiled. A golf cart from the venue rolled up with clear bins of purses and clutches. Staff started calling names so guests could retrieve their things. Somewhere behind the building, the alarms finally cut off with a tired sigh. The sudden quiet was startling, like entering a library after a rock concert. That quiet lasted about 3 breaths. Then a second black SUV, different from the police vehicles, turned into the drive with fast, tight control. The doors opened. 2 men in navy jackets stepped out. Yellow letters on the back read, "State Investigations." They carried cases and moved with the same calm purpose I had seen on Hall. The crowd rippled again. The venue manager hurried to meet them. They showed credentials. She nodded, shoulders tensing in a way only I seemed to notice. She pointed toward the administration wing, offices, contracts, servers. I felt it before I knew I felt it, the sense that the story was about to step up a level. Not just Jason. Not just a wedding. Something bigger. Something that started long before today. The men in navy jackets disappeared inside with the venue manager. People whispered. A groomsman said too loudly, "That's probably nothing." His voice sounded like a boy whistling at night to prove he wasn't scared. Detective Hall came back out, eyes scanning. He saw me, dipped his chin, then crossed the courtyard. "You all right?" he asked. "I think so," I said. "Is it over?" "It's moving," he said. "Jason is in custody. He'll be processed. He'll have a chance to talk if he wants to help himself. We'll see if he's smarter now than he's been." "What about the alarms?" Ava asked. The manager said the system was tampered with. Hall's eyes shifted toward the admin wing. "Looks like someone wanted a failsafe today. If we didn't stop the ceremony, the building was going to. Either way, this wasn't going to be a normal wedding." A cold finger ran down my spine. Who would tamper with a fire system? Someone who wanted control, Hall said. Someone who didn't trust anyone else to tell the truth. He glanced at me, gentle, not accusing. Or someone who wanted chaos they could hide inside. Before I could answer, a shout went up from the far edge of the courtyard near the south gate. Heads turned. A path opened the way water opens around a rock. A security guard in a black suit hurried after a single figure moving fast against the flow. Jason. Not in cuffs. For a heartbeat, no one understood what they were seeing. Then the scene snapped into focus like a lens turning. Somehow, somewhere between the admin wing and the SUV, Jason had slipped his handlers. Maybe a door. Maybe a distraction. Maybe a friend. Now he was sprinting across the courtyard, jacket flapping, eyes locked on one thing.
Me.
He came like a storm, shoving through a cluster of guests, knocking a chair sideways, sending a clutch of white roses tumbling. Two officers shouted and tore after him. The security guard reached, missed. Lauren screamed his name. The boy in the blue blazer grabbed his mother's hand and pulled her back. My body moved before my brain did. I stood, turning to square myself, heels braced on stone. Ava shifted to my side like a shield. Detective Hall stepped forward, hand out, voice hard now. Jason. Stop. He didn't stop. In the space of 1 second, I saw everything, the hurt, the blame, the pride that rotted him from the inside. I smelled his cologne, bright and sharp like a warning. I heard the breath of the crowd pull in as one. Jason lowered his shoulder and drove straight at me, and the world tilted as if the ground itself decided to move. Everything after that happened at once. Jason lowered his shoulder and drove straight at me. Time slowed in that way it does when danger stands a foot away. I could hear everything. The buzz of the police radios, the shallow breaths of the crowd, the creak of my own bones bracing for impact. Ava's hand tightened around mine for a fraction of a second before she shoved me sideways. Jason's shoulder missed me by an inch. His momentum carried him forward like a bull with blinders on. He crashed into the refreshment table, toppling bottles of water and sending ice skittering across the courtyard stones. The crowd screamed and scattered, heels clicking, chairs toppling. Jason, stop. Detective Hall barked, moving fast, one arm raised. Officers closed in, but Jason thrashed like a wild animal cornered. He spun, his face twisted with rage and humiliation, spit at the edge of his lips. His cuffed hands, still bound but loose at the front now, swung dangerously close to Ava. Instinct took over. I shoved Ava back and stepped between them. My voice came out steadier than I expected, slicing through the chaos. Jason, look at me. His eyes snapped to mine. Green, those same green eyes I once thought could hold oceans, now bloodshot, desperate. He panted like he'd run for miles, though it had been only seconds. You ruined everything, he spat. His words dripped acid. You couldn't just leave me alone. You had to. No, Jason. My voice was sharp, steady. You ruined everything. I just stopped pretending I didn't see it. Something flickered in his eyes then. Fear, regret, or maybe just the awareness that everyone was watching. The guests, the officers, the cameras. Lauren, sobbing into her father's chest, staring at him like the man she thought she loved was a mask that had fallen off. The officers surged again. One tackled his shoulder, another grabbed his arm. Jason buckled under their weight, his face slamming against the table with a dull thud. He roared in pain, thrashing, but they held him. Metal clinked as the cuffs were refastened, this time behind his back. The courtyard fell into a hush broken only by Lauren's cries and Jason's ragged breathing. The boy in the blue blazer peeked from behind his mother's legs, eyes wide as saucers. He whispered something that sounded like, "Is the bad man gone now?" Detective Hall crouched beside Jason, speaking low, almost fatherly but firm. You had your chance to walk. You blew it. Now you're making this worse for yourself. Jason groaned, blood from a cut on his cheek smearing across the marble. He twisted his head toward me one last time. His voice was hoarse but venomous. You think you've won? This isn't over, Emily. You'll regret this. You'll regret. Take him, Hall ordered. The officers lifted Jason to his feet and half-dragged him toward the SUV. His voice cracked into curses, promises, threats, all tangled and ugly. His once white shirt was stained, his tie half-torn, his cufflinks missing. The picture-perfect groom was gone. All that remained was a man unmasked before the world. The guests watched silently, some with phones raised, some with hands over their mouths. It was no longer a wedding. It was a spectacle, a warning, a story that would be told for years. I felt my knees threaten to give out, but Ava's arm hooked around me. "Breathe," she whispered. "You did it. It's done." But even as Jason disappeared into the back of the SUV, I knew it wasn't done. Not yet. His threats weren't just noise. The way Lauren's father had looked at me earlier, that cold, deliberate calculation, told me Jason wasn't the only one with skin in this game. For a brief, almost gentle moment, the chaos softened. The guests, realizing the wedding was finished, began to drift toward their cars. The bride's mother comforted Lauren, who sat crumpled on the edge of the fountain, staring blankly at her ruined day. A bridesmaid dabbed her mascara with tissues. The string quartet quietly packed their instruments, the wooden cases clicking shut like final sentences. The world exhaled. And then the next storm rolled in. Two men in navy jackets reappeared from the administration wing, their faces grave. One carried a stack of binders, the other a laptop bag. They moved straight to Detective Hall, speaking low but urgent. He listened, then looked up sharply, scanning the crowd until his gaze landed on me. He walked over, his shoes striking the stone with a rhythm that made my stomach tighten. "Emily," he said quietly, leaning close so only Ava and I could hear. "This doesn't end with Jason. The financial trail runs deeper, far deeper. Contracts, deposits, offshore accounts. And your name, it's all over them." My breath caught. What? Whoever set this up used you as a shield. Jason was just the front. But someone else pulled the strings. My mind spun. Who? Hall's jaw tightened. His gaze flicked toward the far end of the courtyard, toward Lauren's father, still stiff as iron, phone pressed to his ear, eyes locked on me like a hawk. "Stay close," Hall said, his voice low and urgent. "This wedding wasn't just a ceremony. It was a cover. And I think you just stepped into a much bigger game." The alarms had stopped. The courtyard was quiet. But inside me, a louder alarm had just gone off. Because for the first time since Jason's arrest, I realized the real danger might not have been him at all. It was the man in the silver hair, the one whose daughter I had just watched crumble, the one who whispered into his phone as if he owned the air itself. And when his eyes met mine, steady and cold, I knew this story was only beginning. The crowd was thinning, but the tension in the courtyard hadn't gone anywhere. Guests whispered in little knots, half shocked, half thrilled to be part of a story they would tell at dinner parties for years. Police cars flashed red and blue against the white roses, and the buzz of radios crackled like sparks in dry grass. But my eyes were on him. Lauren's father, Richard Brooks. Silver hair, pressed suit, phone at his ear like he was still running the boardroom, even while his daughter's wedding collapsed around him. He didn't shout. He didn't flinch. His face was stone, but his eyes kept sliding toward me. Detective Hall followed my gaze. "You see it, don't you?" "Yes." My voice was low. He knew. Hall didn't answer. He didn't have to. Richard closed his phone and slipped it into his jacket. Then he walked toward me. Not fast, not slow. Just steady, like a man who had never once in his life been denied entry to a room. Ava stiffened beside me, her arm pressing close to mine. When he stopped in front of us, silence followed. Even the guests who were leaving slowed their steps, curious. "You're Emily Carter," Richard said. His voice was smooth, too smooth, like marble polished until you can't tell where the cracks are. "Yes," I said. He studied me, head tilting just slightly, like I was a puzzle piece that didn't fit the picture he had drawn. "I've heard of you." "I doubt it," I said evenly. "Oh, I have." His lips curved just enough to count as a smile, but his eyes didn't move with it. "The ex-girlfriend. The woman Jason used. The reason my daughter's wedding just imploded in front of 200 people." "I'm not the reason," I said. "Jason is. And anyone who helped him." Something cold flickered in his expression. He stepped closer, just inside the line of comfort, his cologne sharp and expensive. Be careful, Miss Carter. You've just placed yourself on a chessboard where you don't understand the rules. Ava moved like a shadow, her hand on my elbow, her chin lifted. And you should step back, Mr. Brooks. She's not alone. Richard's eyes slid to her, then back to me. You may think this is about Jason. It's not. He's a pawn. Pawns fall. But the game doesn't end. And when pawns fall, queens tend to follow. He let the words sit there, heavy, before he turned away. His shoulders were still straight, but the mask cracked just enough for me to see what was underneath. Rage. Rage and something sharper, fear. Hall came back, quick steps, folder under his arm. Emily, Ava, we need to leave.
Now.
What's happening? Ava asked. Hall's voice was low, urgent. The state investigators found files in the admin wing. Contracts. Transfers. Jason's name is there, yes. But Richard Brooks's name is on nearly every page. Offshore accounts. Dummy companies. The wedding wasn't just a wedding, it was a laundering operation. Money moving through vendors, flowers, catering. Millions, Emily. Millions. The word hung in the air like a bell still ringing. And then, almost too perfectly timed, a scream cut across the courtyard. Everyone turned. Lauren. She had collapsed by the fountain, her veil trailing in the water, bouquet petals floating like tiny ghosts. 2 bridesmaids knelt beside her, shouting for help. Her mother wailed. For a moment, it seemed like shock, like grief finally breaking her body down. But Hall was already moving, faster than anyone else. He shoved through the cluster of dresses and dropped to his knees. Call an ambulance, he barked. I pushed forward with Ava on my heels. When I reached the fountain, I saw it. Lauren's face pale, her lips tinged blue, her eyes fluttering. She gasped once, twice, then went limp. Someone had slipped something into her champagne. The courtyard erupted into chaos again. Guests screamed, phones dialed 911. The boy in the blue blazer cried into his mother's dress. Officers rushed to form a perimeter. And Richard Brooks? He stood 10 feet away, watching his daughter convulse in her white gown, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles gleamed bone-white. His eyes, cold, calculating, lifted once more and locked on me. As if to say, this is what happens when you get in the way. And I knew then, the story of Jason was just the first act. The real battle had only just begun. The courtyard dissolved into panic. Bridesmaids shrieked, clutching Lauren's limp arms. Her mother dropped to her knees, sobbing, mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. Someone screamed for a doctor. Someone else shouted into a phone, "We need an ambulance now." Lauren's body jerked once, violently, then stilled. Her white gown clung to the fountain edge, soaking through, petals sticking to the lace like bloodless wounds. The guests circled in horror, their whispers rising to a roar. Detective Hall was already at her side, 2 fingers pressed hard against her neck. His jaw was tight, his face unreadable. "She's breathing shallow," he barked. "Get the med kit from the cruiser." An officer sprinted. Another knelt beside Hall, ripping open the bodice of Lauren's gown far enough to press pads against her chest. A faint whine came from the defibrillator as it powered up. Ava gripped my arm so hard it hurt. "Emily." "I know." My voice shook. My stomach turned at the sight. Whatever I felt about Jason, whatever I suspected about Richard, this was different. Lauren wasn't a villain. She was a girl who thought she was in love, a bride who believed today would be her forever. She hadn't chosen any of this. "Clear," one officer shouted. Lauren's body jolted with the shock. The guests gasped in unison. Hall checked again, nodding once. "We've got a pulse."
Weak.
"Hold it until medics arrive." Relief swept the crowd in a fragile wave, but fear still clung like smoke. Because even with Lauren alive, a darker truth had settled in the courtyard. Someone had poisoned her. Someone had slipped something into her champagne. And the list of suspects was shorter than anyone wanted to admit. I turned slowly, scanning the faces. Guests pale and trembling. Bridesmaids crying. The boy in the blue blazer burying his face in his mother's side. Ava stiff beside me, her eyes darting. And then Richard Brooks. He stood at the edge of the chaos, untouched by it. Not a single hair out of place, his silver suit catching the siren light. His fists were still clenched, his knuckles pale, but his face was calm. Too calm. Our eyes met. My heart clenched. He didn't flinch. He didn't rush to his daughter's side. He didn't scream for answers. He only watched, cold and calculating, as though even this horror was a piece on his board. And in that moment I knew Lauren wasn't collateral damage. She was a message. The ambulance siren wailed in the distance, growing louder. Paramedics rushed in, their bags swinging. They worked quickly, lifting Lauren onto a stretcher, strapping her down, attaching oxygen. Her mother clutched her hand until they pushed her back. The stretcher rolled fast toward the ambulance, disappearing in a blur of white gown and flashing lights. The crowd began to scatter in earnest, guests whispering, rushing to cars, heels clattering against stone. The wedding was gone now, replaced by a crime scene. Hall turned to me, his eyes sharp. "We need to get you somewhere safe. Tonight." "Safe?" I asked, my voice cracking. "From Jason." Hall shook his head. His gaze flicked once more toward Richard Brooks. "From him." Richard, still standing, still watching, lifted his phone to his ear again. His lips moved slowly, deliberately. Then he turned his back to us and walked into the night, his shadow long and dark across the courtyard stones. Ava whispered, "Emily, I think we've just made an enemy bigger than Jason ever was." And she was right, because Jason's arrest had been revenge. But Richard's silence? That was war. The sirens faded as the ambulance carried Lauren away, but the weight in the courtyard only grew heavier. The wedding guests had mostly scattered, heels clicking across stone, car doors slamming, whispers about poison and police. But Richard Brooks lingered like a shadow too stubborn to disappear. Detective Hall stayed close to me and Ava, his shoulders tense, his eyes moving like a hawk scanning for movement. He was calm, but there was something in the set of his jaw that told me he felt the storm coming. "Emily," he said low, "you've seen enough to know this isn't about Jason anymore. He's just the visible crack in the dam. The water behind it? That's Richard. He's been moving money through shell companies for years. Offshore accounts, fake vendors, you name it. Jason was sloppy. Richard never is." A chill swept through me. So Lauren. Hall's eyes hardened. Collateral. Or leverage. Poison at a wedding isn't an accident. Whoever spiked that glass wanted a message sent. I glanced toward Richard. He was finishing another call, his voice low, his hand steady. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and finally started toward the parking lot, two men in dark suits flanking him like bodyguards. Before he climbed into his black car, he turned once more and locked eyes with me. Not a glance. Not even a glare. Just a steady look that said, "You're in my way. And people in my way don't last long." The car door closed. The engine hummed. Then he was gone. The courtyard felt suddenly empty without him, though the echo of his presence lingered like smoke after a fire. Ava let out a shaky breath. "Emily, this is bigger than revenge now. This is survival." I nodded, but my throat felt tight. He poisoned his own daughter, Ava. What does that make him capable of with someone like me? Hall cut in firm. "Listen to me. We're moving you tonight. A safe location. No arguments." I opened my mouth, then shut it, because the truth was I was scared. Not of Jason anymore. Jason was just a broken man with handcuffs on. But Richard? He was a storm in a suit. And storms don't care who they destroy. We left the venue under escort, Ava's arm hooked through mine like she could anchor me to the earth. The streets outside were clogged with police cars, flashing lights, reporters already gathering. Cameras pointed. Questions flew. Was the groom arrested? Is it true the bride collapsed? "Ma'am, were you a guest? What's your connection?" I kept my head down, my black dress blending with the night, Ava shielding me from the worst of the swarm. Inside the squad car, the city blurred past in streaks of neon. Hall sat in the front, speaking into his radio, every so often glancing back at me in the rearview mirror. Ava squeezed my hand, whispering, "We'll get through this. One step at a time." But my chest wouldn't unclench. I couldn't stop replaying the look in Richard's eyes. Cold. Calculating. A man who had already decided what piece to sacrifice next. The car pulled up to a quiet townhouse on a side street, far from the chaos. Hall guided us inside, checked the locks twice, then handed me a burner phone. "Only use this," he said. "We'll rotate locations if we need to. Don't answer unknown numbers. Don't open the door unless it's me." "What about Jason?" I asked softly. Hall's mouth was grim. "He's in custody. But men like Richard? They don't leave pawns in the open unless they have a use for them. Jason might not stay quiet." The thought chilled me. Jason, desperate and humiliated, spilling everything he knew to protect himself, or worse, cutting a deal with Richard to save his own skin. When Hall finally left, the silence inside the townhouse pressed heavy. Ava curled up on the couch, exhausted, but I couldn't rest. I stood at the window, staring at the empty street, waiting for headlights that didn't come. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if I should have walked away months ago, if showing up to the wedding had been a mistake. But deep down, I knew something else. The moment I left Jason, Richard's game had already tangled around me. Tonight was just when I finally saw the threads. I turned away from the window, trying to steady my breathing. And that's when I saw it. A small, white envelope slipped under the front door. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard a sound. Not a knock. Not footsteps. Nothing. With shaking hands, I picked it up. My name, Emily, was written on the front in thick, black ink. I tore it open. Inside was a single card. No words, just a photo. A photo of me stepping off the private jet that morning. My hair pinned, my black dress sharp against the runway. And scrawled in red ink across the bottom, "Queens fall the hardest." The photo slipped from my fingers and landed face up on the carpet, the words in red staring at me like a wound. "Queens fall the hardest." My breath hitched. I looked at the door, then at the window, then back at Ava curled up on the couch. She stirred at the sound of the envelope hitting the floor. "Emily," she whispered, sitting up. "What is it?" I couldn't speak at first. I just handed it to her. Her eyes widened. The color drained from her face. "Oh my God," she breathed. "They know where we are." Hall said this place was safe. How did they? A pounding knock cut her off. 3 sharp raps. Not frantic. Not hesitant. Just steady. Like someone confident they would be let in. Ava's hand clamped onto mine. "Don't," she mouthed. But then a voice came through the door. Calm. Familiar. "It's Hall. Open up." Relief surged through me until I saw Ava's face. She shook her head once, sharply. "Ask him something," she mouthed. My throat was dry, but I managed to speak. "If it's really you, tell me the name of the boy in the blue blazer from the wedding." Silence. Then the voice came again, just as calm. "You're being paranoid, Emily. Open the door." Ava's nails dug into my arm. She shook her head violently. Because Hall would have known. He'd knelt right beside that boy. He would have remembered. "Police," the voice barked suddenly, harder this time. "Open the door before you make this worse for yourself." Every hair on my arm stood up. Whoever was out there wasn't Hall. And they weren't alone. Shadows moved across the window. I counted 2. No, 3. My heart hammered in my chest. Ava pulled me back toward the kitchen, whispering fast. "We have to get out the back. Now." We slipped through the narrow hallway, the floor creaking under our feet. Behind us, the doorknob rattled. Then the sound of metal against metal, someone picking the lock. Panic clawed at my throat, but I forced myself to move. Ava shoved open the back door, the night air cold and sharp against my skin. We darted into the alley, my pulse pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. We didn't stop until we hit the next block. A black SUV rolled slowly down the street ahead of us. Tinted windows. Engine humming low. It slowed when it reached the corner, then stopped. The driver's window rolled down just an inch. Enough to see the glow of a cigarette. And then nothing. No movement. Just waiting. Ava pulled me into the shadow of a dumpster, both of us crouching low, our breaths ragged. "They're hunting us," she whispered. I didn't answer. My mind was spinning, connecting dots faster than I could process. The photo. The fake haul. The SUV. Richard wasn't just sending messages anymore. He was closing in. And then my burner phone buzzed in my pocket. My hands shook as I pulled it out. No caller ID. Just one message. "You've had your moment. Tomorrow, you'll learn what it feels like to lose everything." Ava read it over my shoulder. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Emily, tomorrow's what?" The realization hit me like a punch. Tomorrow wasn't random. Tomorrow was the day of the shareholder meeting for Brooks Global, the empire Richard controlled. The same company tied to Jason's fake invoices, the offshore accounts, all of it. Richard wasn't just covering his tracks. He was making his next move. And somehow I was standing right in the middle of it. The night swallowed me whole. Every street lamp felt like an eye, every shadow a trap. Ava and I didn't go back to the townhouse. We couldn't. Whoever had slipped that envelope under the door had keys, confidence, and Richard's backing. Hiding there was suicide. We spent the night at a cheap roadside motel, the kind with flickering neon and doors that stuck when you pushed them. Ava insisted on sleeping with a chair jammed under the handle. I barely slept at all. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Jason lunging at me in the courtyard, Lauren crumpling by the fountain, Richard's cold stare promising that I was next. By dawn, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to run anymore. "Emily," Ava said when I told her, "you're talking about walking into the lion's den." "No," I said, voice steady. "I'm talking about pulling the mask off the lion." Because Hall had been right. The shareholder meeting was the real stage. Richard wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. He was going to stand in front of the people whose money built his empire, smile that polished smile, and pretend he hadn't poisoned his own house from the inside out. If I wanted the truth to matter, if I wanted his threats to end, it had to be there. Public. Irrefutable. We met Hall outside the building where the meeting would take place. He looked like he hadn't slept either, his suit wrinkled, tie loose, but his eyes sharp. He handed me a slim folder. "Inside this," he said, "are copies of the files the investigators pulled last night. Bank transfers, shell company records, fake invoices, all tying Brooks Global to Jason Reed's schemes. They wanted you to be the shield. Instead, you're going to be the sword." I gripped the folder. It felt heavier than paper had any right to be. "And Jason?" I asked. Hall's jaw tightened. "Still in custody. But Richard tried to send a lawyer at 3 a.m. to cut him a deal. Jason refused for now. Says he wants to talk to you." My stomach twisted. Jason. Even now, he couldn't resist inserting himself into the center. But there wasn't time to think about him. We moved through the crowd outside the Brooks Global Tower. Reporters jostled with cameras. Investors filed through the glass doors in expensive suits. Security was everywhere, men with earpieces scanning faces. Inside, the boardroom was a gleaming cage of glass and steel. At the head of the long table sat Richard Brooks. His silver hair was immaculate, his cufflinks glittering under the lights. He smiled when he saw me enter, a smile that never touched his eyes. "Well," he drawled, his voice echoing, "if it isn't my daughter's little guest." The board members murmured, curious. Hall flanked me like a shadow. Ava slipped into a seat near the back, her phone already recording. I set the folder on the polished table. "This isn't a wedding, Richard," I said, my voice carrying farther than I expected. "You don't get to decide who watches." He leaned back, folding his hands. "Do you really think a handful of papers will topple me?" I opened the folder, slid the copies across the table. "Not papers. Proof." Murmurs rippled. A woman in a gray suit adjusted her glasses, flipping through the pages. A man with a gold watch frowned, whispering to the colleague beside him. Richard's jaw twitched, but his voice stayed calm. "Fabrications. Old numbers. Nothing that will hold in court." Hall stepped forward. "Funny. Because the state investigations team just filed formal charges this morning. These aren't copies, they're evidence. The room went electric. Richard's mask cracked, just for a moment. A flash of something ugly lit his eyes. He stood abruptly, palms flat on the table. "Do you understand what you've done?" he hissed at me. "You've destroyed my daughter's future. You've humiliated this family. You think these people will thank you? They'll burn you alive when the stock falls." I met his glare. Better the truth burns the market than you keep burning people. For the first time, Richard's calm faltered. His voice dropped low, venomous. "You're a fool, Emily. Queens fall the hardest. And you." "Maybe," I cut in. "But when queens fall, they take kings with them." The doors burst open. Cameras flashed. Investigators swept in with arrest warrants in hand. The board members gasped, pulling back from Richard like he was radioactive. The silver-haired giant of a man, so untouchable, so polished, was suddenly just a criminal in a suit. Richard tried to lunge for the papers, but Hall and 2 agents pinned him fast. The cuffs clicked shut. His face twisted with rage. He turned his head, eyes boring into me. "This isn't the end," he spat. "You have no idea how deep this goes." But the words didn't matter anymore. Not with the cameras rolling. Not with the evidence laid bare. Not with the board, the press, the world watching him dragged from his own empire in handcuffs. The room buzzed with disbelief, shock, whispers. Some looked at me with gratitude. Some with fear. But all of them knew one thing. The mask was gone. Hall's hand rested briefly on my shoulder. "It's over," he said quietly. I wasn't sure if he meant Jason or Richard, or the years I had spent letting other people write my story for me. But as I stood in that glass-walled room, watching the empire of lies collapse, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Freedom. And I realized revenge hadn't been the point at all. It was about truth. It was about survival. It was about walking away from the fire and finally breathing again.